because the AI can do the first draft, AI can do the research, and the senior lawyer can review the work of the AI. So do you think fresh attorneys will gonna have some challenge finding jobs?
Maybe. I also kind of wonder about, are clients going to start requiring that firms use AI because it's going to reduce the number of billable hours by associates? Maybe they will. And the other thing I've thought about with AI is that it, like we were talking about before, it's got its challenges.
How do you become from a good lawyer to a general counsel?
I think you start thinking less like a task completer and more like a revenue generator.
What are your negotiation tactics?
As a lawyer, I think we want to show we're good, and the way we do that is by marking something heavily and pointing out all the issues. But that's counterproductive, right? Because your negotiating power, it dilutes the more markups you have.
Michelle, thank you for joining in.
Thanks for having me.
Michelle, my first question to you is, how do you become from a good lawyer to a general counsel?
I think you start thinking less like a task completer and more like a revenue generator. And that's one of the things I wish I'd done earlier in my career. I think as lawyers, we can get very focused on checking off this contract, that contract, and that's important to do. But I think we also need to be thinking about how can we generate immense value for our employer and have a business mindset.
Nice. Can you give me an example of it? For example, most lawyers are, this task, this contract, this agreement, red line this. And from moving on from that to a bigger vision of how can I help my company make more money? If you can give me an example of it, how should lawyers actually be dealing and behaving, and how can they have a big picture? What should they be thinking in their minds to have this big picture, big vision of revenue and not just checking things off?
Yeah, I think it's important to think like a business owner, even if you're not technically the business owner. So I always think, what could cause the business to lose money? How can we gain money? And one of the things that I try to think about is pushing things outside the box. Just for example, I use AI every day in my job, and I use a tool called General Counsel AI. And it's supposed to be a legal tool. It's supposed to be legal. It's supposed to help you with researching laws. It's supposed to help you with drafting contracts. I use it for that. But I also use it to do things like review our responses to RFP proposals, to strengthen them. And I also have it do an economic analysis of our contracts to figure out ways to upsell and things like that and do cost profit analysis. So you just try to think about, those kinds of things.
Mhm. Michelle, you started your career with a law firm and then moved on to in-house as well. There are two paths a lawyer can take, like path of a law firm to become a partner in a law firm, or a path in a in-house company, let's say DGM, where you became a general counsel for spent over 12 years, became a general counsel. Which path is suitable for what kind of person?
The reason that I left my law firm, it was mainly because going to a firm was the only job that I knew, because that was what everybody in the state I lived in at the time was doing. And so I went to the law firm and I did litigation. And in litigation, your job is to tear the other person apart, right? And there's people who are great at that. I think there's a need for that. They're doing justice for people, but it's very adversarial. You're somebody out there is doing their very best that day, and your job is to totally undo what she is doing. And it's adversarial. That's the nature of the job, right? And so I wanted to be, instead of tearing people apart and ripping people down, to be part of growing something and creating something. And so that's why I decided to make the switch to going in-house. My dad and my mom owned a small business, and I just really like the idea of building something, supporting families through the business, and creating something of value. And I think there's roles for corporate attorneys too at law firms, but I do think if you're going to go in-house, you need to have a business mindset. So
That's very powerful. So, also, what about the kind of work? In the law firm, you will be exposed to a lot of variety of issues because different clients are coming to you with different issues. Whereas in an in-house setting, you can focus on one thing, one business area, one technology area, your people. And is there also somebody who's like to experiment more with their work should go to a law firm. Somebody wants to like to focus and go deep in one particular company, one particular culture thesis. Is that also can it also be a factor?
Yeah, I think it's fine if you want to move from a firm to in-house. I think there might be a bit of a, I don't know, not a danger of going into a niche area of law if you're working for a corporation. I do think you could start at a corporation without first working at a law firm. I think one of the big differences between working for a firm and working in-house is that at a firm, you don't know what happens after you close the matter, right? You close the acquisition, you finish the contract, you get the patent, and you don't really know how that plays out, right? But if you're in house, then you see the consequences of your decisions, you see the ripple effect, and you can always be adjusting, and you should be adjusting. You should be adjusting. You should be changing as a result of those actions. And so I love it, and also being in house in my particular role, and especially working for a startup, I'd really recommend that if you're going to go in house, work for a startup because you get exposure to so many different things. Whereas if you're with a larger company, which I was as it grew, you can kind of get siloed and you specialize, but nobody's going to say no to you taking on more work, right? And so I had the opportunity to do a lot of different things, and I don't do them at my current role, but the experience comes in handy even in reviewing agreements.
Where is the money? The money is in the law firm when you're moving towards become a partner, or the money is more you get more paying jobs in-house.
I think it depends. I'm definitely, so I started as a contract administrator. And I had an offer from, they're called legal services. And so the company I had the offer from, they accept clients who can't afford to pay an attorney, which that's available in the United States for criminal defendants, but not so much if you're like getting evicted from your house. And so they made me an offer and it was pretty low. And then I took the contract administration position and it was a little higher. Um, I think I think you I think you don't get what's fair, you get what you negotiate. So I don't think that it's necessarily tied to one or the other, and it really depends on how well you advocate for yourself, and also, can you justify it? Like, can you justify it? Have you proved yourself?
So this is basically a question and an answer is for young lawyers who are thinking about money, which path to choose. Where should I go? Should I go for in-house? Should I go for law firm? How is the money over the next 10 years in a law firm versus money over the next 10 years in a company? So that from that perspective, what would your advice to them would be?
I think if you're going to go with a company, you need to get access to their financials if you can, which if they're not publicly traded, that's difficult to do, but you can still get it. You can just explain that, look, you want to be there for a long time, so you want the company to be there for a long time as well. Get a non-disclosure agreement and understand not only their current finances, because that plays a role in your salary, but also the growth plan, not just how many clients do they have, but what clients are in their pipeline.
Mhm. Uh, you also worked with a professor as his research assistant. Should that be also be considered by young lawyers and young attorneys?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. It really helped me just in research and drafting. And it wasn't, so my primarily research and drafting role right now is contracts. That's not what I was doing with that research role, but it was really good just for critical thinking and figuring out how to research and draft. So yes, I definitely think so.
But now the research and drafting can be done in seconds. Uh, I mean, long back it was needed, but is it still needed now in the AI world?
I absolutely think so. And I think the AI is only as good as the questions that you know how to ask the AI. So I definitely think there's a need for it. I do think that the implementation of I think it's going to shift lawyers from being more reactive because it's leveling the playing field, right? Like, let's be honest, AI, it's kind of leveling the playing field for drafting contracts, for researching a bit, but it still takes that expertise and a lawyer to understand, to review the output of the AI, to know what questions to ask the AI. So I do think so.
Mhm. And you have moved. worked for almost 20 years in law, moved from multiple places, from law firm to in-house, now in Bell. What has been your toughest career challenge?
Um, it was an experience with intellectual property, and I know your company focuses on IP, so I thought this would be a good story for you. But my biggest professional challenge was I was relatively new. I was at the technology company in Alabama, and we had many. So our flagship product was open source. And so companies could use that for free to build their products. We also licensed it under a commercial module. People confused copyright with trademark rights. And so they thought that just because they could use the software, they could also use the trademark. And so they were using their trademark in Google AdWords and keywords. And so we had the registrations for the trademarks. And so as part of the Google AdWords keywords policy, I filed a list of only authorized resellers that could use a mark. And there was this huge backlash, and there was this whole ecosystem of open source companies out there that were using our product legitimately, and it was destroying them. And we found out pretty quick. And so we issued a public apology, a public blog around that. I changed our trademark policy. I actually implemented a trademark licensing program to license the logo mark, not just the word mark, to open source companies that didn't have a commercial aspect to it. And so I realized that legally I was right. I held the registration. I thought I was doing the right thing with, protecting our trademark, but you can be legally and technically accurate and then realize that there's a whole ecosystem that our product at the time was built on. They're contributing back to our software. And it was just the wrong decision. And that was definitely like something I learned from, that you can have firm opinions. I definitely did. I was like, this is our mark. I have our registrations, but you can keep them loosely held, and you can be willing to change those opinions, and grow and learn from it always. So that's probably one of the bigger ones.
Mhm. Very interesting, Michelle. Michelle, a young lawyer, a fresh lawyer, fresh attorney who is still looking to find and determine which area of law should they choose, family law, litigation, corporate, IP. How can you advise them to choose a particular field in the beginning? What's the method? What's the method here?
Yeah, I know this is really trite, but it's not just a saying, follow your passion. Like, follow your passion. Don't, obviously, like, pick something that there's going to be money in it, right? But follow your passion. Like, and I know it sounds so cheesy, but it's so
People
true. If
don't
you
know. People don't know their passion. They don't
it,
know. They don't know
you
their
know you
gifts.
you at the beginning you have interests, right? Like you may not know, like back in law school, okay, I didn't know I was going to love contracts because I'd never done contracts, but I knew I loved writing. I was on the newspaper staff. I was doing blogs. Like I knew I loved writing. And I still, it's a transferable skill. And so like follow your passion, and just, an example. So my prior company, I was there, it changed a lot through M&A, so it wasn't the same over the years, but I spent 15 years with them, right? And so I was successful, but I've been there a while. And so I just knew I wanted to change. And so I wrote my own job description. I thought about, what kind of company do I want to go to, and the culture, what kind of skills, what kind of impact do I want to make? And then I updated my LinkedIn profile for that. And they reached back out to me, and it matched my passion because I like to and it's not just trite, saying, but I want to make a difference in the community. I've done pro bono legal work since 2012 through the pro bono partnership, helping nonprofits and, helping them free up their budget that would be spent on legal things for other things like paying the rent. And I'm also on the board of a nonprofit called Road Recovery. And so that's one of my passions, and my legal skills, my contract drafting, it supports a nonprofit. Now, Bell Techlogix, the way that it met my passion was I do a lot of contracts. Like that's what I like to do. I do a lot of contracts. And it also met my purpose in giving back to the community, and not through me personally, but through our clients, because our clients they're making such a difference. Like, for example, one of them is, this is publicly known, it's Brownability. And so Brownability makes accessible vehicles like taxi cabs. So you can get a wheelchair in there. And so when I'm in New York City and I drive around and I see, brownability on the bumper of a taxi cab, I think, in part, I helped our client, potentially help my neighbors who need accessibility because I was helping make their job easier with contracts and IT help desk services so that they can go and do what they need to do. So it's kind of an indirect, passion match, but I need to be, for me, I need to be able to connect it all back. I can't just clock in and out. So who knows, but I like to think
Beautiful.
about the ripple effect.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is beautiful. This is like a bigger vision and bigger picture of what you're doing. You're not just negotiating a contract, you're helping a bigger audience, bigger masses.
Yeah.
Michelle, you love contracts, and contract is your go-to thing. And contract is all about negotiating. Um, and you absolutely said you don't get what you ask for, you get what you negotiate for. How do you negotiate as a lawyer? What are your like like you might have read the book by uh, Split the Difference by Split the Difference, right? The book on
Hmm.
negotiation. So what are your negotiation tactics or
I focus
strategy?
on, yeah, so I like to focus on what's important. And I think it's hard because as a lawyer, I think we want to show we're good. And the way we do that is by marking something heavily and pointing out all the issues. But that's counterproductive, right? Because your negotiating power, it dilutes the more markups you have. And so when I negotiate, I think about there's usually three core things that are important. Everybody wants to know, how can I get out of this contract on both sides? Everybody wants to know, when do I have to pay that person? Everybody wants to know, when am I going to get payment? And then everybody wants to know, if they're not performing, like as a vendor or a customer, how can I terminate? And so I read all of it, but negotiation wise, I really focus on that. And I also use AI to kind of play out hypothetical scenarios with the language. For example, a client isn't paying. Is this language strong and enforceable? And it kind of plays out that scenario and lets me update my drafting technique. And then the other thing that I've learned is just framing your ask and how you communicate is so important. And it can just make such a difference in it, and explaining the reasons for your revisions and being open and you've heard it, actively listening to the reason the other party has a revision, and understanding that they might have some internal negotiation at their company too. So you need to be able to explain things in a way they can take back inside their company and maybe get the movement that they need. But I focus on, minimal but necessary red lines, always protect my client, and also just how I communicate. You can advocate for your client without being hostile and aggressive. And I think sometimes, especially newer lawyers and sometimes even firm lawyers, think that to be an effective advocate, you have to be like very, very like firm and very hostile. And it's counterproductive. It's counterproductive.
I've seen a lot of those kind of lawyers who just raise their voice for no reason to show how assertive they are, although they would have rarely any meat in what they're saying. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's not
makes
and it's not just about excuse me, but it's not just about getting the contract signed, but about that long-term relationship. And if you're left with like a bad, taste in your mouth, you're always going to remember that. So,
mm, mm, mm. No, that's very beautiful, Michelle. Uh, in your career and in your life story, what's the most important chapter so far?
Um, probably I would hope like the most important chapter is always going to be like your current chapter because you want to think like your best chapter is behind you. So I would hope like right now, and I view myself, and I've heard this others people say it, but as a business person that just happens to have a law degree, and always thinks about like how to advance the company and also how to help the people and that the employees are human beings. So I would hope like this chapter I'm in now. And something I really focus on is I'm the only lawyer at my company, but I also want to try to give back to the legal community. And I think as lawyers, our job is to contain risk. That's kind of our job: identify risk and contain it. And it's counterproductive for a business because you always need to be changing and moving forward. And so I think a lot of lawyers think the way I'm going to contain the risk is to say no to and be resistant to change, including AI. And so I've been trying like lately doing a lot of webinars, a lot of trainings. I trained over 500 other lawyers on use of AI, trying to get them more comfortable with it so that they're not just like accepting it, but also advocating for use of AI at their companies and creating that ripple effect outside of my own company and just trying to educate and inform, other attorneys. So yeah, so that training was through a group called In-House Connect, and it's a group of like in-house lawyers, and so 500 attorneys signed up for it, and we talked about agentic AI, which is AI that is used without human oversight, and that's where like complexity really starts to snowball. And so it's just about educating the other lawyers just on, first of all, like what is agentic AI? You might have like seen the term, maybe not, but do you really know what it is? And how to safely use it. And then I've also written articles on the use of AI. I wrote one that was published in GC Connect, and I called it AI on Trial. And I just talked about lawyers are divided into three camps with respect to AI. There's some that it's like a hard no, and I've said this, and one person said I was abdicating my responsibility as a lawyer by using AI. And that's, there's lawyers out there. And then there are others who are not 100% on board with AI. And when I say AI, not just AI, but like any new technology, but not 100% on board with AI, but they're open. They're open to like, okay, tell me more about it. I want to learn more about it. And then you've got other lawyers who I'm now in this camp. I used to be in the other camp who are, wholeheartedly advocating for it. So I do, public speaking. I do articles on it. I do posts on it. I say that I'm a runner. And so one day I was outside running. I was on my slow jog and I saw all these cars passing me. And I thought, they're going to get there so much faster than I. And so that's an analogy with AI, right? I think that lawyers who are using AI are driving a car, right? And they've got to be responsible for hitting the brake. They've got to be responsible for using their turn signal. But the lawyer in the car is going to get there faster than the lawyer on her slow little jog around the neighborhood, but they still have to be like responsible and know how to use it. So
This is a beautiful analogy. I haven't heard this before. This is beautiful, and you can get this idea only when you are running or doing something for yourself. AI on trial, your article. If you can throw a little bit of light on the article and on the use of AI by lawyers.
yeah, so it started just as a LinkedIn post because one of my coworkers, JK Suresh Babu, was asking me just about AI and my perspective on it. And so I started to type a reply back to him, and it turned into this novel. And I was like, I'm just going to write a LinkedIn article. And that got picked up and syndicated by GC Connected. And so the purpose on it is just to talk about what am I seeing in the legal field on use of AI. And a lot of lawyers, well, not a lot of lawyers, some lawyers, they just ask me, like, how are you getting comfortable with AI? They're asking me questions like, how are you comfortable putting confidential information in AI's mouth? And I'm like, do you use Microsoft? Do you use SharePoint? Do you use Outlook? Because you're putting confidential information in your emails and your SharePoint. And the way you get comfortable with AI is the same way you get comfortable with any technology. You've got a responsibility to understand what is their information security practices, what are their privacy practices, and New York Bar Associations, various ones, and even the ABA has issued like guidance to lawyers on this topic. So I cover that in my article just so people know that there's legal guidance out there. It's not just the Wild West out there with AI. Things are rapidly changing, but there is guidance out there. So I talk about that, and then I just set out the three different categories of legal views that I'm seeing based on being out there doing webinars, talking to other lawyers, seeing these threads on LinkedIn, participating in the conversations, and kind of where I think it's going to go.
If you can quickly tell us about the guidance of American Bar Association on use of AI for lawyers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's the same as so they've issued, I think they called it generative AI guidance, and they said that lawyers before they use it with any new technology, they've got a responsibility to understand what are the security practices, what information is it collecting, how is it collecting the information, things like that. And I think just because AI is changing every day, that guidance is updating on a regular basis.
That's a wonderful point. You spoke about using the AI with responsibility, and you should. I mean, you feel lawyers are questioning: Are we, when we are giving our confidential information into an AI, is it safe? It is not safe, and you perfectly counter it down by saying you're giving your information to anybody and everybody. You're writing an email on a Gmail, Google gets it. You're writing an email on Outlook, Microsoft gets it, and so many other places when you're putting your information, everything, they all big companies have our data, whether you agree or not. When you're using Alexa, it is listening to everything that you're saying and doing. Is privacy naked?
Um, I don't think so. I think people are unaware of the terms under which they're submitting their information. Just for example, talking about submitting confidential information to AI, don't put your confidential information in the free version of ChatGPT. And we saw what happened with ChatGPT they publicly indexed, publicly made available conversations or queries, I should say, that have been made on ChatGPT that have been marked to share, and people I don't think read the terms, or maybe Observe AI didn't make available the terms. I wouldn't say privacy is naked. I just think that there's a lack of awareness, and I don't know if that's on the consumer side or the vendor side on the terms under which this information is being submitted. And so, yeah. And I saw just the other day that LinkedIn updated their terms on AI as well. And it looks like now you have to opt out to them using your posts to train on the AI. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, companies want to monetize you, right? And the way they monetize you is your data. So
Mm, mm. And lawyers adapting AI easily, or they still have reluctance? What's the status in the US?
I think it's growing. I think there's still reluctance just from what I'm seeing. I go to dinners. Just for example, I was at a dinner in NYC the other month, and we were talking about AI. And some people just don't use AI at all. Some do. I think there's still a lot of hesitancy, as there is with any new thing, anything new. They kind of want to wait and see until the dust settles. But if you do that, then you're going to be so far behind the curve. So you just need to educate yourself as much as you can on it.
As a lawyer, you are just supposed to use AI. Let's say you use this General Counsel legal AI, AI for General Counsel. And there's so many other bunch of tool stack which AI lawyers can use. As lawyers, are we just supposed to use AI, use agentic framework of lawyers? Or are we also supposed to think about building something? Because now building is very easy. Building a product is easy. Should we be building something in AI? Should we only be consuming it?
I think you should always push it. I think you should be trying to build something to the extent you can. Like, for example, the response to RFP analysis I gave. We've got a library prompt where we custom create our own prompts in GCAI that are shared to improve and strengthen the proposal. So I don't think you should just, if you can, not just use the technology like off the shelf, but be looking at ways to improve it. And, always be looking for the problems in your company. Where are people slow? Where do they need help? How can you help them? What ways can you help them? Things like that. And just this isn't an AI example, but when I came to Bell Techlogix, I was the first. Well, they had another general counsel. He was a contractor, but I was the first like salaried in-house lawyer. And so their contract management system was scanned documents, PDFs, and you couldn't really do data analytics on that. You couldn't really have a sense of what the terms were. So I took a CRM system called Acumatica. It was mainly used for finance, and at no extra cost to the company, I built a contract lifecycle solution in it. So now it automates, again, like no extra cost to the company. It automates notices of upcoming renewals so we can be proactive and speak to the client. It reduces, I call it contract value leakage, because I track things like cost of living increases, and for vendors, like what are the SLAs they owe us and things like that. So I think it's always important to be building something. I think it's important for anything to think, how can I, not just to your company, but how can I be of help?
I'm saying you're one person in the company, one lawyer in the company, a reasonably big company like Bell. And do you see that being the trend in the future as well, where we don't need 20 lawyer team, one or two people with a lot of tools? without even much outside help, outside counsel help. Do you think is that going to be a trend for the future?
You know, I don't know if there's a lot of solo in-house attorneys out there. I do know that if there are, it's not really being publicly spoken about. I started posting a couple of weeks ago just about my experience being the only in-house attorney, and sometimes I get asked the main concern is, I shouldn't say concern, but people ask like, how are you handling it? Are you able to take a vacation? And the questions are coming from firm attorneys and from attorneys that are only used to working on an in-house team. And I'm sure that if that was the only thing I'd ever known, I would have been concerned about it. But it's been for the most part, like for the most part, other than 4 or 5 years, I've been the only other attorney. And I like it because there's not a layer between me. Just for example, okay, say I had a team and I've worked on a team before. Because there's not that layer, I don't have to, if somebody asks me a question about a contract or what I think about something, I don't have to ask somebody else because I'm hands on, and at the same time, I've got the ability to participate in strategic decisions, which I couldn't always do when I was on, I was one of a couple of different associate general counsels. And so do I think it's going to be a trend? I mean, I guess it depends on the economy and where things go, but I don't really have a sense right now of how many other solo GCs there are out there. I can't tell because not many people are talking about it. But I like it, and I've got I don't know. I don't actually know the reason for that. I'm not sure if it's because there's few of us out there. I don't think so because when I posted about it, I got a couple of responses from other lawyers who are like, "Yeah, me too," and they were just interested in hear how do I surge work? Like, say I've got just for example, my mom passed, and so when she was in hospice care, I was able to take off the time that I needed to be with her because I could surge and send the work over to outside counsel. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know the reason for that. I don't know. Some people just aren't as active and writing articles or doing presentations. There's no. I haven't seen any presentations on being a solo GC, so I don't know. I don't know the reason for that. Maybe I don't know.
And you have been doing it pretty well in your career and taking things forward yourself, also using some kind of outside help, like outside GC. Uh, are after the advent of new technologies, new AI in the last 2 years, the tools, the system which you can give you first draft, they can do research for you fast. Since you have access to so many tools and AI in our fingertips, is the reliance on outside counsel reduced? Are giving them less and less work?
Yeah, I use outside counsel pretty rarely. I generally only use them for a specialized area, like for example, export law. Like you need to know about encryption functionalities and things like that, mergers and acquisitions. Um, do I think the reliance on outside counsel is going to be reduced as a result? Maybe. I also kind of wonder about, are clients going to start requiring that firms use AI because it's going to reduce the number of billable hours by associates? Should you require them to use AI? And if so, is that going to save the client fees? How's it going to work out in the cost model? I don't know the answer to that. I think maybe, but like we were saying before in our conversation before, I think you still need a lawyer's oversight. Just for example, like GCAI is great. AI is great, but the danger is that AI can speak very eloquently and in a professional way. And just because somebody can speak eloquently and well doesn't mean they're right. And so, just for example, GCAI, it drafted you know what I'm talking about. So, GCAI had drafted a contract for me. And so I noticed two things. The first is I said draft a detailed contract from scratch. I don't remember what it was. It didn't include anything about governing law. There's nothing about governing law. And the other thing was it didn't it didn't in the indemnity section, it didn't limit it to third party claims. And maybe that's just because the AI hasn't had the information to train on to do that. And so it's still like you still need a lawyer, be that an external counsel or an in-house counsel, just reviewing it. I think you still need human oversight. I'm excited about agentic AI, but just the lack of human oversight, it's gonna be interesting.
You're absolutely correct. And that's exactly what Google is doing right now. So let's say Google has about engineers from L3 to L10. L3, L4, L5 engineers are the fresh level entry engineers who do all the coding. Google has stopped hiring L3, L4, L5 engineers because they're fresh engineers and their work can be done by AI. They want L6, L7 engineers who can review the code done by an AI. Now, the same thing you also said. We don't need fresh lawyers, perhaps, to do the first draft, to do the research. The AI can do the first draft, AI can do the research, and the senior lawyer can review the work of the AI. So, do you think fresh attorneys will gonna have some challenge finding jobs?
Do you know? I mean, maybe they will. And the other thing I've thought about with AI is that it, like we were talking about before, it's got its challenges. And I've been using AI for 2 years, like you were talking about for 2 years. And you think about junior associates and newer lawyers. Would you put up with a junior associate or a new lawyer putting out consistently C quality work product where you always need like a senior lawyer overlooking it? And I've heard other people say treat AI like a very smart paralegal or a very smart, associate. But at the same time, if you can't, like, if you're having to, not to say micromanage, but like micromanage the AI and always be reviewing its output, I don't know. I think you're still going to need junior associates. You still need that level of human oversight there. I think it's going to change things in ways we can't even imagine. I mean, I couldn't have imagined AI like 3-4 years ago. So who knows? Like, who knows how things are going to change? Like, who knows? So, and I think people back when the self-service kiosks in the grocery store came out, people are like, oh, everybody's going to lose their jobs. It's going to be like a grocery store run by robots. And it's like, people can't figure out the kiosks. I mean, there's still going to be somebody out there, just like the lawyer overseeing the AI, overseeing the kiosks and coming up and helping people. So yeah, I think people think that by staying still, you're safe. And that's not the case. You can't control everything. You can't control it. So
Mm, makes sense. Oh, how do you see the role of GCs changing in the next 3 or 4 years using AI?
I definitely think so. I think lawyers are going to get a lot more business focused. I think that's going to be because it's going to free us up to do more strategic work. It's going to come up with the drafts, and yes, we're going to have to make some changes to it, but it's going to do quick drafting, quick analysis. So we're going to be freed up to do much more strategic work. I think I'm very active in the legal community, just in a lot from webinars to articles to I judged a contract drafting competition for Miami Law School last year. And one of the things that I saw is that law students are being trained on the use of AI in like ways couldn't even imagine. Like the way I have GCAI review my language and play out hypotheticals. That's because I saw what these law students were being trained to do in their contracts drafting competition. They were given suggested prompts and they had to disclose the prompts to me and the other judges. But I think these up and coming newer lawyers, I think they're going to be more efficient than us. I think they're going to be faster than us. And I think those of us who have been out in the field now and haven't been proactively getting this training, I think there's going to be a big divide between us unless we start to, unless us, lawyers that are already out here like proactively take the initiative and train and grow and adapt because these newer lawyers that are coming out. So I definitely think that's going to happen. More proactive. Yeah.
Mm, mm. What's your view on the agentic AI legal side? And we are being things are being done by the agents on their own with less supervision. How are lawyers supposed to adapt themselves in the world of agentic AI?
Yeah, I think just by staying informed and educated on it, and not being afraid. But I think knowledge is power, and just educate yourself on it. There is this. It wasn't in the United States; it was in Canada. I don't know if you heard about it, but the airline chatbot thing. Did you hear about that? Um, yeah, where they were consulting the chatbot on bereavement fare because his aunt or somebody had passed, and it said, okay, we will refund you your airfare to go to the funeral. And the chatbot said that, but on the airline's website in another location, it gave conflicting information. And so the consumer relied on what the chatbot said. And in the end, the court said, well, it can't be the consumer's responsibility to review all the information out there and make sure there's no like conflicting information, right? And so you think about that and you realize that you're really responsible for the technology. I don't know if airline developed the chatbot, but you're responsible, even if you don't develop it, that lawyers are going to be responsible for understanding that technology. It can't just be a CTO responsibility to understand the technology. It's our responsibility too. We've got to understand, what the contracts are about and what the compliance is built around, and we can't be afraid of it, and we can't like punt responsibility for understanding the technology to somebody else. We really got to do our best to understand it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Uh, you also mentioned about that the role of GC is going to change. They got to become more business savvy because their AI will do a lot of stuff for them. How will GCs have to relearn because they got to not do law anymore. They got to advise more and be with the business more and have business sense and act like a founder, act like a business owner. Will they have to be retrained? Will the GCs have to be retrained to do their jobs?
I don't think so. I think you just need to listen to the coworkers around you and understand the problems of the business and realize we're not just there to participate in legal conversations, but and really they're looking for us to offer, business advice. And I think as lawyers, a lot of us say, it depends because we want to say here's all the gray, and our world is gray. Our world exists in gray, but they're like, we want an answer. Can you give us, an answer, black or white, a business answer, and be prepared to show your homework, if they ask and they're like, okay, why do you think that? But I don't think it's going to change. I think you just need to educate yourself on the needs of the business and be listening to what are their challenges, and how can I help? I don't have a business degree. I was actually thinking about getting my MBA a while ago, but I got like a real life MBA because I just watched every. I've got the opportunity to be around C-level executives. Like, it's the best education you could have. And law school didn't train me how to draft contracts. They trained me on case law. And so I think real world experience and just like listening to those around you, I think that's the best training you could have.
Hmm. That's beautiful. Michelle, how do you define success in your personal life, in your career as a lawyer? How can a lawyer call himself or herself successful? And
I
what's
think
your
just,
definition?
yeah, I think making a lasting difference and a ripple effect. And I think about this a lot because I don't have kids. I'm not going to have kids. And so I think a lot of people's legacy is their children. But I don't have that. And so I think about how can I make a difference in the community, both in my legal work and, my professional work, and how can I help our clients, the ones like, for example, Brownability. And so for me, it's about, being a lawyer is a privilege, and how can we use our privilege to help other people? Lawyers are expensive. They're expensive, and there's organizations out there that help, like nonprofits that are helping give, substance abuse counseling. They're offering housing to people who are homeless. They don't have much money. They're a nonprofit, and using your legal skills, you don't have to just go out there with like a hammer and do Habitat for Humanity. You can use your legal skills to give back. And I think we have a responsibility to do that. I think about that a lot. And I love my current company because of the clients that we have, and I like about how they're giving back to the company. And I always want to think about that, like what is my legacy going to be, and how have I helped other people? I don't think success is about, it's not about making money. It's not about making money. It's about, how can I help other people, and how can I make an impact, and, what are people going to remember? And, you know, 20 years after I pass, nobody's going to remember I closed this deal. Like, I was part of a merger and acquisition team that closed a over $400 million M&A thing. And not many people, like, they're not going to remember it much. But do you know what? Like, I've written handbooks for nonprofits that are helping kids struggling with substance abuse, and they're going to remember that. They're going to remember me, and hopefully, like, I made a little bit of a difference, in that person's life. So I don't think about success being money or about like my work accomplishments. I don't think about it that way. I've done some cool things, in work. I definitely have. But for me, success is like, are people going to remember me for making a difference? And so I try to think about that every day.
Michelle, that's very empowering. Having said that, when you're a young lawyer, you are out of the college, out of the university, or you look for a career, you want to make a lot of money. And when you have money, when you've tasted success, when you have done great work, now you start thinking about making an impact. Uh, is that is that the path generally?
Yeah, for me, it's about like making an impact. And yeah, I want to, I want to make money. Like just for example, like I supported my family, and my parents and my brother have all passed, but I was supporting them. We bought them a house. I was financially supporting them. So money to the extent that it supports your family, and also if my husband were to lose his job, that I can support him. Okay, that's important. But like beyond that, and you want security, right? You want a roof over your head, you want food on the table, but there's a certain threshold at which it's like, what good is being the richest person in the graveyard going to do you? You know, like we're all going to end up in the dirt. Like, and so it's like, I think about that and I'm like, I want to make an impact and something like really cool. And, and I know this is kind of going off subject, but I've heard one of my other friends know somebody who also doesn't have kids. And so, and her will, she is donating her entire estate to completely test the backlog of rape kits in her state, get all of those rape kits tested. And she doesn't have kids, but she's thinking about how can I make a difference in my community? Because you can't, like I said, like the richest person in the graveyard. What good does it, like, you want people to remember you for doing good and like making a difference? And how can I, how can I make the best impact using like what I have available to me?
That's
And it's
very
just,
powerful.
yeah, I've just had a lot of like family stuff, like, my family's all passed. And so it's very important to me, it's very important to me because of that.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Michelle. Michelle, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Definitely be more business minded, and also I think, I've always tried to think this way, but I've realized like over time, like it's more and more important. But trust is gained in drips and it's lost in buckets, and it's not just trust like in the information that you provide, and it's not just trust in that you're making the right decision, but also just trust in the relationship, and that's become even more important to me as time goes on with my family, with my friends, with my coworkers, with my clients. Just for like and not just like coworkers, but people who are adversarial to you. You can still have trust with them. Like just for example, like so years ago, I handled disputes too, and so years ago we had somebody, not my current employer, but my prior employer, a couple of ones back. They It was a firm, and they were representing a customer of ours who said that when he bought a product, he thought it was going to do X function, and it didn't do X function. And so they engaged a law firm. The first time I heard from him was a law firm, and he's like, "Oh, you didn't tell him it wasn't going to do this function. That's why he bought it, and he wants a refund." And so I I found where he had attended, and I had record of his attendance on a webinar describing the features and the functions that the product had and didn't have. And so was supposed to be on a call with this person and the lawyer to, continue to talk about this. And instead I called the other lawyer and I said, "Hey, you might want to relay to your client they attended this webinar. And so they knew it wasn't going to do this." And he said, "Thank you very much." And so you don't have to like, don't cause the other person to have egg on their face. You don't have to, even if they're adversarial to you, like just remember trust is gained in drips but lost in buckets. And I think about that, a lot.
That's a very, I haven't heard this before. I read a lot, but how did you realize this? I mean, we all know that it's difficult. We used to say it's difficult to gain trust, but easy to lose. But then your analogy of drips and buckets is beautiful. When did you realize it, and how did you realize it?
I think I started realizing it when I was a contract administrator. Um, and I started noticing that other people were not responding in a timely manner, and I started having issues with them. instead of like going to them directly. And this was just a consequence of experience, right? It wasn't it wasn't intentional, but I started, I'd have conversations with their boss, and I was like, so and so is not being responsive, so and so is not in the office, and I realized like when that person came in my office and they had just like this now, they had a yellow sticky pad, and they brought it in my office and they said, well, so and so came to me and said you said this and that about me, and why didn't you just tell me? And after that, I was like, it's not conflict to have a transparent like conversation, just like be open about things. And so that was very early on. That was when I was a contract administrator. And I just realized that if I've got like a concern or a question, like have the conversation, and maybe you need to escalate it. You might need to escalate it to another person, but like have the conversation first. And then after that, I started to realize it's not just coworkers, it's clients, it's adversaries, it's friends, it's family. And it's very hard to gain back trust once you have lost it. And it just takes a minute. You can be in a hurry, you can be tired, you can be unwell and send like a callous comment or an email you shouldn't have sent, and the trust is like gone. And so just like, you know, so
That's empowering, Michelle. Michelle, what legacy you want to leave when we leave this world? How do you want to be remembered?
yeah, I hope that it's that, I helped other people when they really needed it. And when I say really needed it, not just they needed a contract done by tomorrow, which like that's the case. But also, like I was there for them in a pinch. I gave them advice, or I helped them like in a crisis. And so I really hope that people remember that, and that I tried to use my privilege for good, and I used my law license for good, and I tried to give back and like do the best that I could. I think like I try to have the best of intentions, and sometimes the decisions are still wrong, but I always try to have like a strong moral compass, like and so I just hope people like remember that. Not that I was smart or that I was great at contracts, even though like that's fun for me, but just that I try my best to do the right thing and to like really help people to the extent I could.
Michelle, how do you handle work conflicts?
You mean disagreeing with somebody, or? Yeah, so I think you like was it first seek to understand and then seek to be understood. Um, and so I've heard the phrase when I came here, I heard the phrase we're talking past each other because you don't understand what the other person is saying. And so I think like, and I realized that, and I think that conflict arises from not understanding enough. And so I think just like truly, like, and you've heard this said, but truly like listening and trying like to understand what the other person is saying, and then like making an informed decision. And sometimes you're still going to disagree. And if it's important, you might need to escalate that and just like take emotion out of it and understand like you've got a fiduciary responsibility to the business. Like in the end, my job isn't to get the contract signed, even though that's part of my job, but it's about like making sure that the relationship is successful. And so I might need to escalate it. It's not personal. If I do, I'm going to communicate that to the other person and say, hey, we need to have a conversation about this. And if the decision is made the way I want it, great. And if not, that's fine too. Respect the decision. Might disagree with it, but respect it. So yeah, decisions have been made that I didn't agree to, but once it's made, you support it and you just like understand that. And as long as the other person that you have a conflict with, or you yourself, has like the true opportunity to be heard, then I think you can resolve it. But I think you need the opportunity to be heard, and I think especially like as lawyers rise within their company, I think sometimes have you seen Hamilton, the room where it happens, like that song? You
Like
haven't seen
once, yeah.
Hamilton? Yeah, yeah. So I think as lawyers rise within their companies and we're in rooms where decisions are being made, that we also have a responsibility to say their names in the room. So if you think somebody's doing a great job, or if you had a disagreement with them and they educated you on something, that you have a responsibility to say their name in the room with senior leadership, especially as we rise, because leadership sometimes doesn't know. They don't know. And so sometimes you have a responsibility to like, you know, share that information. So
Absolutely. One of my mentors said that, people work with you when they feel understood and not when they understand you. So
I love
it's
that.
important. it's important that people should feel understood. This is
Yeah.
very empowering conversation, Michelle. Really thank you for coming on this podcast with me today. We could gather a lot of wisdom from you, some beautiful insights about your journey and how young lawyers can choose their paths, how can they feel successful, how can they use AI, how fast they're going to use the AI, your analogy between the drip and the bucket about trust, your analogy about the lawyer in the car and the lawyer who's running on the road. All of those things are very pertinent and very useful, and really thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm so glad you reached out, and I'll be following your company. So thank you. I really enjoyed it, and I'll message you on Vanessa's information. I think she's just a really great person, and she's got a lot of similarities with me. But if you reach out to her, I'll let her be the one to share that. So thank you.